Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. This time we're going way back, like ancient history, back to explore leadership.
We're going to see some pretty incredible examples of what works and what absolutely doesn't.
Exactly. And we're getting all of this from, believe it or not, the Book of Mormon.
Specifically from the Book of Ether.
Oh yeah, Ether. It's basically a crash course in kings. Some were righteous, some not so much.
It's kind of fascinating to see how these kings' choices shaped their people's destinies.
It's like, did they learn nothing from the kings who came before them?
Well, that's what we're going to unpack today. We'll be looking at chapters 7 through 11.
Right. And to help us break it all down, we've got this super helpful lesson guide. It highlights the key takeaways from each chapter so we don't miss anything.
And to see how these ancient principles connect to our lives today, we'll also be looking at a talk by Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf.
Oh yeah, a classic. The greatest among you.
It really bridges the gap between the leadership we see in the scriptures and the kind of leadership that Christ exemplified.
Because, let's be real, Christ is the ultimate leadership role model, right?
Absolutely. But before we get to that, let's dive into the Book of Ether.
Okay, so picture this. Ancient civilizations, tons of drama, battles, political intrigue, even secret combinations that sound a lot like, well, ancient gangs.
It's a wild ride.
Yeah, it's action-packed. But amidst all the chaos, we're zeroing in on the leadership qualities of these kings.
And it's amazing how clearly the Book of Ether shows this pattern. Righteous leadership equals peace and prosperity. Wickedness, well, chaos and downfall.
It's like a universal law or something.
Pretty much. And it's a cycle that's been repeating itself throughout history, right up to today.
Okay, so first up, we meet King Orihah. Now, he stands out as a truly righteous leader. He governed with humility and always remembered that the blessings his people enjoyed were from God.
That's so key, isn't it? Recognizing a higher power. When leaders acknowledge that their authority comes from God, they're more likely to lead with justice and compassion.
And it's not just about being nice. Under Orihah's leadership, his people thrived. They experienced tangible peace and prosperity.
It shows that righteous leadership has very real, very positive consequences.
Now let's talk about King Shul. He faced a whole different set of challenges. He had to defend his people from enemies while protecting their freedom and faith.
He was a real defender of liberty, but what's interesting is that he didn't just focus on military defense.
Right. He understood that true strength comes from within.
Exactly. He encouraged his people to turn to God for guidance and strength. It was about fortifying their spirits as well as their city walls.
It's like empowering people to be resilient from the inside out.
I love that, but now get ready for a sharp turn because we're about to meet a king who went down a very different and very wrong path. King Jared.
Oh boy, this guy. He basically staged a power grab, seizing the throne from his own father.
Talk about family drama.
Yeah, and to make things worse, he let those secret combinations we talked about earlier, those shady groups, gain a ton of power.
And we have to remember, these weren't just your average gangs. These were networks of people conspiring to gain wealth and power through violence and deception.
Like undermining the very fabric of society.
Exactly. Think corruption, organized crime, things that still plague us today. Jared's story is a classic example of how not to lead.
A cautionary tale for sure. When leaders ignore, or even worse, exploit, those corrupt elements in society, everyone suffers.
It erodes trust, undermines justice, and ultimately leads to chaos. Thankfully, after Jared, we see a return to righteousness with Emmer and his son Coriantum.
Oh, breath of fresh air.
They followed in Orihah's footsteps, ruled with justice, and brought blessings to their people.
It's like they hit the reset button on leadership.
Right. It shows the power of one righteous generation to inspire the next, to create a ripple effect of peace and prosperity.
Okay, but hold on, because then we come to King Heth.
Oh, Heth. He seemed to miss the memo on how to be a good king.
Big time. He totally ignored the counsel of the prophets, leading his people down a dangerous path.
It highlights how crucial it is for leaders to seek wise counsel, especially from those with spiritual insight.
Especially those prophets who are literally trying to warn you about what's going to happen if you don't change course.
Because when leaders isolate themselves or disregard prophetic guidance, things rarely end well.
It's like, hello, haven't you been paying attention to the kings who came before you? Learn from their mistakes.
Speaking of learning from the past, King Shays definitely had his work cut out for him. He inherited a kingdom in shambles after all the chaos caused by previous kings.
Talk about a tough job.
But what's remarkable about Shays is his resilience. He didn't let the challenges overwhelm him. He focused on rebuilding his nation through righteousness and perseverance.
Like a true leader, stepping up during a crisis.
Exactly. He didn't just try to maintain the status quo, he actively worked to make things better. It takes a lot of courage and vision to lead like that.
He sets a high bar for leadership in tough times, that's for sure. But then, brace yourselves, because we come to Riplakish, perhaps one of the most infamous kings in the Book of Ether.
Yeah, this guy was all about greed, cruelty, and oppression, like textbook tyrants.
Seriously, his reign is like a masterclass in how to destroy trust and create resentment.
It's the opposite of servant leadership. It's all about exploiting people for personal gain.
And it's no surprise that his reign ends in rebellion and downfall. It's almost like a cosmic law, you reap what you sow, even as a king.
It's like a constant theme we see. Kings who are obsessed with their own desires fail, while those who serve their people and uphold righteousness succeed. It's like a choice between serving or exploiting.
And it really highlights the difference between those righteous and wicked kings we've been talking about. But now, let's talk about King Moriankanin. He's a more complex case.
Right. He did some good things for his people, but his personal life was, well, let's just say he had some struggles with morality.
It makes you wonder, can a leader truly be effective if their own life is a mess?
Right. It raises questions about integrity and whether a leader's personal choices undermine their ability to lead effectively.
So it's about walking the talk, not just talking the talk. Okay, next up is King Lib. He was all about hard work, industry, and building a thriving economy.
He really understood the importance of self-reliance and encouraging people to contribute to the success of the nation. He fostered innovation and economic growth.
That's incredibly relevant even today, especially with all the conversations about personal responsibility and contributing to society. But sadly, we end our tour of kings with Etham.
Etham stubbornly clung to wickedness despite all the warnings and all the examples set before him.
It's like he had a self-destruct button and just kept pressing it.
It reinforces the idea that even those in positions of power are accountable for their choices, and rejecting righteousness leads to disaster. So we've seen this whole spectrum of leaders, some inspiring, some downright awful. But now it's time to turn to the ultimate leadership example, Jesus Christ.
Right, all those kings with their successes and failures, they all point us towards the higher standard of leadership embodied by the Savior.
That's where Elder Uchtdorf's talk comes in. It helps us connect these ancient examples to the timeless principles of Christ-like leadership that we can apply today.
So we've explored those kings, seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And now we're ready to dive into the blueprint for true leadership as taught by Christ himself. I'm ready if you are.
Let's do it. This is where things get really interesting. Let's turn to the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus gives us some profound lessons about leadership.
Oh yeah, like that time he washed his disciples' feet.
It's such a powerful image of servant leadership. It shows that true leadership isn't about power or prestige, but about humble service.
And it wasn't just a one thing. His whole ministry was about serving others, healing the sick, comforting those who were hurting, teaching with love and compassion.
And remember that powerful statement he made. He that is greatest among you shall be your servant. Talk about a radical concept, especially back then.
It completely flips the world's idea of leadership on its head.
It's about putting the needs of others before our own desires for recognition.
And that brings us back to Elder Uchtdorf's talk. He takes these timeless principles from Christ's life and shows us how to apply them today, no matter our role or calling.
Right. Christ-like leadership isn't just for church leaders. It's for everyone, everywhere.
So whether we're leading a nation, a family, or even just ourselves, these principles apply.
It's about looking for ways to serve, to lift others, and to make a positive difference.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. I can't wait to dive into the specifics of Elder Uchtdorf's message and see how we can put these principles into practice.
Me too. There's so much we can learn from his insights about leading with love, humility, and all those Christ-like attributes.
This is shaping up to be a pretty amazing deep dive. We've seen how bad leadership wrecks everything, and how following Christ's example brings blessings.
And Elder Uchtdorf gives us a practical roadmap for developing those Christ-like leadership qualities in our own lives. It's not just theory, it's something we can do.
Okay, this is getting good. I'm ready to keep going.
Let's do it. Welcome back. I don't know about you, but I'm still thinking about those kings from the Book of Ether.
I know, right? Some were amazing, some were a complete disaster. But it really helps you see the difference, you know?
Like what it actually means to be a good leader. And that's what we're going to unpack now with Elder Uchtdorf's talk.
Right, the greatest among you. He really lays out what it means to lead like Christ. It's not about bossing people around.
Not at all. Elder Uchtdorf says true leadership isn't about seeking personal gain. It's about ministering to others.
It's about service, right?
Yeah. And he shares this story about President Richens that really illustrates that.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Even after being released as a stake president, this guy was out there cleaning up after horses in a parade.
It's like, wow, talk about humility.
It just shows that leadership isn't about your title or position. It's about a willingness to serve no matter what.
Even if it means scooping horse poop.
Exactly. And it reminds me of that image of Christ washing his disciples' feet. It's like true leaders are willing to do whatever it takes to serve the people around them.
It's so powerful. And Elder Uchtdorf goes on to say that callings in the church, they're opportunities to serve, not a chance to get a bigger title.
It's so easy to get caught up in that, though, like wanting to be seen as successful or important.
Totally. But true leadership is about putting others first, not ourselves.
Elder Uchtdorf even warns us against seeking honor and recognition for our service. He says, the most important calling is the one we have right now.
Oh, that's good. It's like, focus on what you're doing now and do it with all your heart.
Don't worry about getting promoted to the next big thing. Just be faithful in what you've been given.
And that's where developing those Christ-like attributes comes in. Humility, compassion, patience, that willingness to forgive.
Right. Those are the things that make a real difference. But how do we actually do that? How do we become more like Christ?
It's a process, right? We're all works in progress. The important thing is to keep trying, keep learning, and keep relying on the Savior.
Yeah, we've got to stay connected to him. And it's comforting to remember we're not alone in this. We have the support of other members, our leaders, and most importantly, Christ himself.
Absolutely. And as we study the scriptures, pray for guidance, and try to follow his example, we'll start to develop those Christ-like qualities.
Little by little.
Yeah, it's not an overnight thing. It's about those consistent efforts to serve, to listen, to forgive, to put others first. It's a way of life.
It's not just about being a better boss or parent. It's about becoming more like Christ in everything we do.
You got it. And Elder Uchtdorf talks about this idea of lifting where we stand.
I love that phrase.
It means we can all make a difference right now, no matter where we are, what we're doing.
We don't have to have some big fancy calling to be a leader.
Right. He reminds us that the church is all about helping us become true disciples of Christ.
And that happens every day, not just on Sundays or when we're wearing a name tag.
It's about looking for those small ways to serve and uplift others. Helping a neighbor, mentoring a youth, just being kind to someone who's having a rough day.
Every act of service matters. Every act brings us closer to Christ.
And that's what true leadership is all about, isn't it? Following his example.
Absolutely. Now, Elder Uchtdorf makes this other point that really resonated with me. He talks about choosing the harder right over the easier wrong.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. It applies to everything, but especially leadership.
It's because sometimes the right choice isn't always obvious, and it can be tempting to just take the easy way out.
But true leadership means doing what's right even when it's difficult.
Even when no one's watching.
Exactly. And he also talks about this idea of not inhaling praise.
It's like, don't let the compliments go to your head.
Stay humble. Remember that it's not about you. It's about serving God and others.
Which brings us back to humility. It's like the key ingredient to being a Christ-like leader.
Without it, we're going to struggle. We've got to remember that we don't have all the answers. We need to learn from others. And our goal is to glorify God, not ourselves.
And to do that, we need his guidance. We need to pray, study the scriptures, and try to align our will with his.
It's a journey, and it's not always easy. But when we submit to God's will, he gives us the strength and wisdom to lead.
You know, one thing I love about Elder Uchtdorf is that he doesn't just talk about leadership in terms of those big formal roles.
He reminds us that we can all be leaders in our own little corner of the world.
Like those quiet acts of service that might go unnoticed, but they make such a difference.
It's about how we treat people, the love we show, the way we serve. It's about our hearts.
Yeah, it's about who we are more than what we do.
Beautifully said.
So we're talking about leadership, but not just the kind that comes with a title or a position.
Right. We're talking about something much deeper.
It's about those everyday acts of service, those quiet moments where we choose to put others first.
It's about reflecting Christ's love in everything we do.
And I think Elder Uchtdorf sums it up perfectly when he talks about those unsung heroes.
The people who are quietly making a difference in the lives of others without any expectation of recognition or reward.
It's a beautiful reminder that true leadership isn't about the spotlight. It's about the heart.
It's about being willing to serve even when no one is watching.
And it's about recognizing that we're all on this journey together.
We all have opportunities to lead, to lift, and to make a positive impact.
And as we do, the blessings of true leadership flow not only to those we serve,
But also to ourselves.
it's a challenging path, but ultimately it's the path that leads to true joy and fulfillment.
And isn't that what we all want?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into leadership, what are some key takeaways that we can carry with us?
Well, I think the biggest one is that leadership at its core is about love, service, and striving to be more like Christ.
It's not a destination, it's a journey.
And it's a journey we're all on together.
Whether we're leading a nation, a family, or even just ourselves.
These principles apply.
It's about looking for opportunities to serve, to lift others, and to make a positive difference in the world.
And as we do so, we'll experience the true joy and fulfillment that comes from following the Savior's example.
This has been an incredible discussion. We've seen the devastating consequences of bad leadership and the incredible blessings that come from following Christ's example.
It's been inspiring to see how these ancient stories from the Book of Ether connect to the timeless principles of Christ-like leadership that Elder Uchtdorf so beautifully outlines.
I hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and inspiration to carry with you as you strive to be a better disciple and a better leader.
And remember, leadership isn't about titles or positions. It's about the way we treat others, the love we share, and the service we render.
So, as you go about your week, keep these principles in mind. Look for ways to serve, to lift, and to lead with love.
And most importantly, remember that Christ is always there to guide and strengthen us on this journey.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time.